And then I think at some point when I started getting annoyed, I'm just kind of already annoyed and I don't want to bother with a YouTube tutorial. And now I'm like, I really should have bothered with a YouTube tutorial. Hi, hello, my name is Allie. I'm an independent graphic designer, usually coming to you from just outside Toronto, but today we're on location a little. This is my channel where I talk about what I'm knitting, how it's going, and what it's costing me. And today I have a whip update for you coming from this cute little cottage in a little town called Westport that I'm renting with my mom. Copper is also here. Hi, what do you see out there? So my mom wanted to do this painting workshop that's nearby, so I decided to split a cottage with her for the weekend and sort of treat it for myself as like a little writing retreat while she's away during the day. So I've been here with Copper working on writing, which I will talk about a little bit more at the end of the video in Off the Needles. Also, if I sound terrible, it's because I'm recovering from a cold that is sticking around for a really annoyingly long time, and the show must go on. So as for my tea of the day, I'm drinking my Sloan Classic Earl Grey, which yes, I did bring tea bags of with me. I usually drink this as loose leaf tea at home, but I do have a collection of the tea bags. So when I go places, I'm not without tea because I do find that a lot of the time you'll go places where like they have stuff to make coffee, and sometimes they even still have a kettle, or they tell you you can make it in the coffee maker, but then they just don't give you tea, or they give you like 2 tea bags for like several days. That's just not gonna cut it. So I like to come prepared. So as for what I'm wearing, this is my cloud bow top, which I knit last summer, layered over top of my Fausta tank top, which you can't see very clearly, obviously, but it is there. So we're doing double up on the knitting today. So as for cost per wear, since I finished my cloud bow last summer, I've worn this 8 times. It's kind of hot there, dude. You sure you wanna be there? All right. And since the total project cost on this was $130 Canadian, that puts us at a cost per wear of $16.25 Canadian. Now, as for my Fausta, which I also finished last summer, I've also worn that 8 times. That seems to be the magic number. I spent $75 to knit that one, which puts our cost per wear at $9.37 Canadian. So both of these are still relatively high, but they're also both garments that are kind of temperature specific in terms of when I can wear them. I mean, I could do more layering with my Fausta, and I'm kind of always trying to remember that as an option, but I can't say that I reach for it a lot in the winter. I usually only do that in the context of layering these two together. But 8 wears on both, considering they haven't even actually like experienced a full spring and summer season because they didn't exist until like the end of last summer. I feel like that's coming along pretty well, and hopefully the cost per wear is looking better after another calendar year. All right, so the first whip day I want to talk to you about is my Essential blanket from Unraveled. So this whip is sponsored by Unraveled, and they did gift me this kit. So this is for their Essential blanket, which I'm knitting at the baby blanket size. And I'm actually finding it really strange filming here because just the way I needed to set up the camera to kind of get the shot that I wanted, like I wanted the cute fireplace, I wanted the cute view at the window with the water. But because of that, the camera is really far away from me, so I'm not just like holding things up the way that I usually am, and I kind of have to be cognizant about not like holding it up in front of my face. So bear with me. It seemed like a really good idea to film here, and then cut to me spending like an hour trying to figure out how to set all this up, and I'm kind of questioning that decision, but here we are. So when it's done, this blanket is gonna measure 85 centimeters by 105 centimeters. And it's going to be this cute like tricolor blanket. Currently, obviously, I am only on my first color. I have not gotten that far yet. But so the Essential blanket is one of the kits you can get from Unraveled that includes the pattern, the yarn, everything you need to make this happen. And this kit runs $171 US, $244 Canadian, or $296 Australian. And the yarn you get in this kit, it's this chainette yarn that's this really interesting combination of 60% alpaca, 30% merino, and 10% poly. And it has this really sort of rustic look, but it's really soft on the hands at the same time, which I really like because I don't feel like I would like knitting with a yarn that feels as rustic as this looks, but I really like the effect that it gives, and I think it's gonna make for a really nice homeware piece. So it's just kind of the best of both worlds for this. I have really been liking having this project. You can see, obviously, I'm not working at this constantly. This hasn't seen a ton of progress since my last update, but what I've actually been using this for is because it's so simple, and that's really the goal of Unraveled kits, is they're really geared toward very just kind of calming, mindful knits, rather than like intricate things that are gonna take a lot of brain power and focus. So I've actually just been knitting a little bit of this every night before bed while reading, because I like to read before bed, but I often have this problem where like I don't want to go to bed and therefore get to start reading because I have to stop knitting. Like I often just feel like I am procrastinating the getting to bed and reading part and not doing as much reading as I would like to do because I'm like, no, but I'm working on my knitting. I don't want to stop knitting. And so this has become sort of a way that I trick myself to go to bed at a decent time by being like, okay, you have to put down your like main whip, but you can work on your blanket and read before bed. So that's actually been working really well for me so far. I usually just do like maybe 2 or 3 rows before bed while I'm reading my book, and because it's so simple, I find that I can read a book while I'm working on it because it requires so little like looking at what I'm doing. So I've been really enjoying doing that. I mean, at this rate, it's going to take me a very long time to have a finished blanket, but that time's gonna pass anyway, and by the end of it, I will have a blanket. So yeah, I've really enjoyed having this kind of fill that role because while I do in theory really like reading and knitting at the same time, it's very dependent on just having the right thing to knit and do that. And also a bit dependent on the book. It can't be like super fine print or like very sort of winding, elaborate prose. So it definitely also is a bit book dependent, but it's very, very much knit dependent. And this is really the perfect knit for that kind of thing. So I've really been appreciating it for that. So if you're also interested in trying out reading while knitting, or just generally knitting an essential blanket, or any of the Unraveled kits, you can get a 10% discount on any of their kits if you go to unraveled.store/AllieMakesEverything. All right, now let's get to the sort of main whip that I've got going on. So if you've been following along, I've been working on this sort of buddy knit with my friend Lauren, and she's been giving her updates on the channel too. So we will also have an update on Lauren's project after mine. So to quickly do our project overview, I am knitting the Tucker by Alicia Plummer. This is a pattern that accommodates up to between a 72 to a 74 inch bust, just depending on how much of the recommended positive ease that you want. I'm knitting a size 2, and the pattern costs $9 US. I'm knitting this out of the Hedgehog Fibers Oh So Fine Merino in the colorways Foam and Down by the River, and usually I would be holding those up to show you, but I have none left to show you because they're all in this, which I'll show you in a second. But like I mentioned in my last video, I actually realized, oh, I'm running out of this. I am gonna need to buy some more yarn, and I'm gonna have to find something else to fade into, because it was kind of, either I need to get more Down by the River, which was my bottom color, and just extend that, and then sort of have like 1/3 foam, 2/3 Down by the River going on, which I wasn't sure about to begin with, and then was having sourcing issues, just trying to find this yarn in stock somewhere that was not either coming from the UK and costing $1 billion in shipping, or coming from the US and tariffs and just all of these things that I did not want to deal with right now. But I ended up finding something I could source locally to me, and that ended up being Twist Nouveau from the BNMA in the colorway High Tower, which I was actually able to get locally at the Knitting Loft in Toronto, so that was perfect. But because of all this, because my initial yarn order got hit with duties, and then I had to buy this extra yarn, this project cost has quickly gotten out of hand. This was supposed to be a $100 Canadian project that has now ended up being a $200 Canadian project. So, you know, do we love working on a fingering weight garment that has cost as much as some quite bulky things that I've knit? No, we don't. But, you know, at least it's because it's like fun indie dyed yarn, you know, and some duty. It's really only $150 in fun indie dyed yarn, and then duties. So that's fun. But yeah, so our total project cost, including the pattern and the yarn, is $206 Canadian, or about $148 US. So ouch. Hopefully I get a lot of good wear out of this one. So I cast this on March 21st, and let me show you where we're at. All right, so we have so much shirt. We actually have like so close to a finished garment that it feels a little bit silly to be filming this update, but this is just, it's just one of those things. This is just how the timing's working out. But because of that, I'm actually gonna avoid trying this on today, because I just kind of feel like if I put this on in this video, it's gonna look virtually exactly the same when I put it on in the next one, and that's just gonna feel kind of anticlimactic as like a grand finale for this piece. So I'm gonna refrain from that today. We're just going to admire it in this state. So you can see that I've now got my third color integrated into the fade down here. This is the Le Bien-Aimé Twist Nouveau in the colorway High Tower. And ooh, I feel like, so I'm using my laptop as a monitor while I'm recording so I can see this, and this looks really good from this distance. This is one of those things where I feel like when you're working on things close up, you're so much pickier, right? Because you're looking at it close up, and you notice all of these things that when you're wearing them in actual life or seeing them from like a normal distance, you don't really see. And I feel like as I've been knitting this up, I've been feeling like that micro striping is really striping. Like it's really prominent. And like, it's not when I hold it up, but at the same time, I do feel like the gradient effect comes through a lot better at just like a moderate distance away. So that actually makes me happy to see it on the computer this way, because yeah, I feel like that's looking quite nice. I was a little bit worried when I first started integrating the new color, because I mean, I had picked it thinking from pictures online, from looking at everything, like, okay, this looks like a pretty natural extension of the colorway. But when I started knitting it up, I was just like, is it too much darker? Like, is it just suddenly too dark? And again, like looking at it close, I was feeling kind of unsure, but at this point, like, this has sort of deviated from the original vision anyway, like it had to as soon as I was introducing another color. And I feel like from this distance, it's really selling me. It's not, like I said, it's not exactly the original vision. It's definitely turned into something different by necessity, but I really like what it's turned into. So when I was trying to find a new color to extend this into, and I'd sort of realized, okay, I'm gonna need to start looking outside of Hedgehog Fibers, because Oh So Fine Merino is really hard to find locally. So I was just looking for something that would sort of have like a comparable feel to it, that would be the right gauge, that wouldn't seem dramatically different when I knit them together. I didn't want there to suddenly be like a weird change in the quality of my fabric, like at the waist of my shirt. So I was doing lots of digging, and when I found Twist Nouveau, I was like, ooh, this yarn looks really similar. Just looking at the ply of it, not that I'm an expert, so I'm just sort of like going off of what it just looks like to me. I don't know. It was also very similar in terms of weight per meter. So I felt like, okay, this is gonna be a really good match. When I actually got it and started knitting with it, I started to get a little bit worried because it was kind of becoming apparent to me why it's called Twist Nouveau, like why there's this emphasis on twist, and sort of realized, oh, this is a higher twist than the Hedgehog Fibers Oh So Fine. Like when I was looking at the pictures of them, I was like, okay, these look really similar because I can see the similar like quality to the twist of it. Like you can see these kind of two distinct pieces twisting around each other, right? It looks very similar. But I realized when I started working with the Le Bien-Aimé, oh, it just has like more twists more frequently. It just has more twist to it. And so I was a little bit like, oh, I hope this isn't gonna cause problems. So I was a little bit nervous of that, but I was hopeful that it would come out in blocking, and at least it's a fade, like I'm not suddenly switching from one to the other. So hopefully sort of any distinctions between the two will sort of be faded in the same way the color is faded, so it's not coming in all at once, and some of that can sort of get hidden in the in-between. And I'm pleased to say that after blocking, because I did block this once I got to the end of the sleeve, like before the ribbing, just to make sure the length was right. So I blocked this, and I do feel like it turned out really well, and I don't really see a discrepancy in the quality of the fabric where that suddenly joins, which is great. I do think that if you look really closely, you can still kind of see the difference in the high twist. Let's see if I can show this to you. I don't want to focus. Oh, is it also locking the focus? Please tell me I haven't been out of focus this whole time. So yeah, I do feel like if I look really closely, I can kind of see like a slight distinction in the quality of the stitches. Like I can just see more of those twists within the stitch itself, but that's only looking very closely, and it hasn't impacted like the drape of the overall thing, which was really what my concern was, right? I didn't want half of the sweater to just hang completely differently than the other half, and I think as far as that goes, we are in the clear. I'd also mentioned in my last video, because last time I hadn't introduced any of the Twist Nouveau yet, I was just sort of at the very bottom of this down by the river section, and I was talking about debating between whether I wanted to do a mid-project block or not, and my debate was that I just wasn't loving it when I was knitting it up, because, you know, I was knitting fingering weight yarn on a pretty big needle for fingering weight, and I knew from my past project that I was gonna really like that fabric once it was blocked, but I also knew that I was not loving it while I was working on it. It was just kind of looking, just kind of like scraggly, just kind of awkwardly open, like really showing all of the inconsistencies in tension because it's not sort of fluffing itself up to fill the space. And that combined with just the sort of weird little technical stuff I was talking about in my last video of just issues keeping things nice on the underside of the sleeve, like where the frequent color changes were happening, I was just like, ugh, it just doesn't feel great. It just kind of feels like this project is just kind of a mess. I spent like most of my last episode complaining about all my issues with this sweater. And so I was debating blocking it because I knew I would like it better after I blocked it. But I was also like, I don't know, I think this would be really fun to get that big reveal once it is done, to be like, and it suddenly is nice. Like I knew that it would be a dramatic difference. So I was torn between doing it sooner just for a morale boost and doing it later as more of a dramatic reveal. And what I ended up doing was just continuing to work on it unblocked until, like I said, it got to the end of the sleeves. And then I was like, okay, I need to know how much this is gonna change to know how much more sleeve do I need to knit? And the answer was, in fact, you don't need to knit any more sleeve, because while the body didn't get much longer, I think I got maybe like that much extra length on it from blocking, the sleeves really did get dramatically longer, I think just because of the way that it relaxed like over the shoulders, the way it flows down there. So I did get a lot more sleeve than I realized that I had, and was like, oh no, it is definitely time to start the ribbing. If not, like I probably could have already started it, but I'm not gonna rip this back because I love a long sleeve. So I just decided to make sure when I started my sleeve ribbing, because that's what I'm currently working on now, I just decided to make sure that my cuff is really nice and tight so that if the sleeves are long, I can really easily push them up and they will stay. So in order to do that, I made a modification that's not in the pattern where I did a knit one, knit two together, knit one, knit two together all the way around the cuff so that I would reduce my stitch count by a third. And then I also still went down a needle size in working the ribbing as well. So hopefully that's going to give me a cuff that's really nice and sturdy as far as being able to push up my sleeves and they stay where I put them. Another modification that I made actually is when I was doing the bottom ribbing on this, I decided to do a split hem rather than just a regular in the round hem like is written in the pattern. So if you can see, the split there, and I decided to make the back hem just a little bit longer than the front, just for that little added touch, which I think is really cute. One thing I did find kind of funny with this pattern is, unless I missed it, which is possible, you know, I find there's always a lot in a pattern that doesn't apply to you because it's about a different size or like a different choice you could make in the pattern. So you end up having to kind of skim over other things. And so sometimes I find that I end up missing something that actually is relevant to me because it was just kind of, I thought it was like part of this other thing that wasn't relevant to me, so I skipped all of it. So it's possible that I just missed it. But as far as I can tell, this pattern in the photos has multiple variations, right? There's a short sleeve and a long sleeve. This is how I ran out of yarn. I didn't realize I was looking at the short sleeve yardage. But in both of those versions, if you look closely, they have different ribbing situations going on. The short sleeve version has a much shorter body ribbing than the long sleeve version is shown with. But as far as I could find in the pattern itself, there was only instructions given for the ribbing of the short sleeve version. Like, it just said to do like a small amount of it. And I was like, it's definitely not what I'm looking at in this version. I don't know, what do I do with that? But I also knew that I didn't think I wanted ribbing that would be quite like that version anyway, because the long sleeve version shown in the pattern and the way the instructions are written, it's written for quite a cropped length, which is just not what I wanted to do for this. I wanted this to be like a cozy, like covers me all up regardless of what pants I'm wearing it with. If I'm wearing high-waisted, it can get tucked in. If I'm not, it still works with those pants too. So I knit mine quite a bit longer, and I didn't think I would want that same kind of like really cinched look that she has on the cropped version, because that's just gonna look very different when it lands like on my lower hip rather than at my waist. So I thought that I wanted probably a much more open bottom than that, and that's why I decided to do the split hem, so that it would just be really sort of cozy and casual. And I just made up how long I wanted it to be, because like I said, I didn't really see recommendations for that in the pattern. Maybe I missed it, maybe it's not there. I'm not really sure, but I do really like how it turned out. And so when I was doing my split hem, just to keep my edges tidy, I just slipped the first stitch on every row. So since the last update, I was sort of working with a careful order of operations and doing this fade to try to make sure that my fade ended up like even between the body and the sleeves, and just that I had enough to do the different segments of the fade that I wanted to do. And kind of despite my best efforts, it's not like quite what I planned for it to be, and I'll walk you through why. But so since my last update, the process that I did was I was working on this section down here that's all down by the river in my last update. So once I finished that, I went back to the sleeves, which I had left off in this bottom section where it's mostly down by the river, but still with a little bit of foam. And where I had left that off the last time I had paused the sleeves to go back to the body, I had a little bit of foam left. Like, I was weighing things and estimating like, okay, if I'm doing this many rows in the body, it takes me whatever, like half that amount or 2/3 that amount or whatever it was for both of the sleeves to do that same number of rows. But with estimating and with weighing yarn, like, we're dealing with such minute weights that I'm like, I don't know if this scale is even accurate at this small of an amount. So I ended up with each sleeve having like just a little tiny ball of foam left. And when I switched back to the sleeves, I was like, I might as well just use this up, right? Like, if I'm running out of the yarns I wanted to make this project with in the first place, I should use up all of that yarn so there's as much of the colors as I originally wanted in the first place, right? But what I didn't really fully think through is that because I was now at the section where foam was only 1 out of every 3 rows, using up even a very small little ball of foam was actually going to give me like enough rows of foam that once you add in for every 1 row of foam, 2 rows of down by the river, quite a bit of extra length. So this meant that not only does my foam on the sleeve come down further than it does on the body by a decent amount, but also I used up quite a lot of down by the river in order to use up that foam in this section, the mixed color fade section, that I had originally earmarked to use in the like all down by the river and down by the river fading into high tower segments. So it meant that after I finished the down by the river on the sleeve, and kind of went, oh, I should stop that sooner than I originally was planning, or I'm gonna run out of down by the river and not be able to fade it properly into high tower, I went back to the body and started the fade into high tower. And I already knew this fade was going to have to fade at a faster rate than this fade, because inherently, down by the river, it's now a middle color. So where foam at the top, it gets to just start out being solid foam and then have its segments fading it into down by the river. So it's only fading on one side, it's only fading from the bottom. Down by the River has to fade in both directions, right? It has to fade in from foam and then it has to fade into Hightower, which means there's just less of it available for any given section than there was of foam. And then I thought that there was of Down by the River when I was calculating how I was going to use it in combination with foam. So this was all sort of a lot of on-the-fly calculations, and sort of like, despite my best efforts of all of these calculations, by the time I realized that this color was also coming in, it kind of threw things off. So it's not the sort of perfectly even rate of gradation that I had originally planned, just because I ended up having to work in a whole other color than I originally planned. So you might notice that this fade is a little bit less gradual than this fade. But because of what I had done on the sleeves, where I continued the foam further than I realized that I probably really should have, and therefore used up more of the Down by the River in doing that than I, again, probably should have, the fade on the sleeve is actually even less gradual than the fade on the body. Let me see if I can show this clearly. Technically, all the segments of the fade are there, but they're happening so much more quickly in the sleeve than they are in the body. So like, for comparison, here they are starting at the same point, and you can see the sleeve is already solid Hightower by here on the sweater, where it's far from solid. Like here on the sweater, it's still doing 50-50s. So the sleeve fade turned out to be a little more abrupt than I had originally planned, but this all also kind of became irrelevant in blocking, because when I blocked it, and like I said before, the shoulders kind of relaxed, and so the sleeves ended up longer than I thought that they were. None of it lines up anyway. Like, even if I hadn't done the extra length in foam, even if the Hightower came in at the same place and faded at the same rate, it's just, they're just still not side by side anyway. So I think that's just, we're just releasing that. We're just choosing that that's no longer a criteria. What happened to my fire? This could maybe use some work. All right, we poked the members a bit, we added some new wood. It is actually doing some things you just can't see from this camera angle, so we should look. So last time I, like I said, was complaining a lot about issues that I was having where I was doing like my color changing on the sleeve. And this is one of those cases where, okay, if I had just like taken a few minutes to watch a YouTube tutorial, I could have saved myself many hours of just like low grade frustration. Like, it was never that acute, and that's why I never stopped to actually do anything about it. But in the comments on my last video, someone was like, you know, like using helical knitting would really solve a lot of these issues you're having with the micro stripes. And I saw that comment and I was like, I've even watched a tutorial for helical knitting before, and I remember thinking, oh, this isn't that complicated. I should like remember to use this in time when it's relevant. And for some reason this time it just didn't like occur to me. I just didn't think to do it. And then I think at some point when I started getting annoyed, I was like, I wonder if this is a thing helical knitting would fix, but I'm not sure. And I'm just kind of already annoyed and I don't want to bother with a YouTube tutorial. And now I'm like, I really should have bothered with a YouTube tutorial, because I watched it again and was like, this is so easy. Like, I definitely could have been doing this the whole time and I probably would have solved a lot of those issues. And I wouldn't then have weird, like literal holes that I accidentally created in my sleeves that I have now hidden when I went and I wove in a bunch of my ends from all the different like fades beginning and ending. So I use those to fill in these holes, but just like weird, weird things. And I had said last time, I wonder if some of the kind of laddering issues that I'm getting around, because normally I don't have issues with laddering and magic loop, but because of doing color changes close to beginning of round in the magic loop where the split was, I was like, I wonder if the problem is that I'm trying to change colors, not right there, because I thought that would be an issue, but a couple of stitches after the magic loop split. I had wondered if maybe doing it a couple of stitches before the magic loop split would be better. So I switched to trying that, but obviously the way that I switched that was unwise, because in trying to like move that yarn, I guess I don't know, I didn't do it properly. And I ended up with a hole and was like, okay, cool. So stitched that up when I was doing my ends. And then I also just found, because it was before the split and not after, sometimes I like forgot that those stitches were part of the next round and that therefore they would need to change colors. So sometimes I like started the round with the wrong color and then like would pick up the right color and get a hole, or like I have a couple spots on the sleeve. Where are they? Where like, I don't know if you can see it from this is the problem with filming this far away from the camera. It's hard to show you things. This definitely won't be my permanent setup, but there's just sections where like the stripe is just kind of broken because one color just goes all the way through because I forgot to change color before the magic loop split. So there's a few little funky things, but like I said, most of it resolved with just weaving in my ends. But on this one sleeve, I have this issue where I don't know what something very terrible was happening. Like I got some real magic loop laddering that, yeah, even on my laptop, like you can see the weird line that it's created up here, which obviously did not come out in blocking because this has been blocked. So any miracles I might have been hoping for there did not occur. So I'm thinking that's right under the underarm. So I'm thinking that what I actually probably need to do is like pretend it's a seamed sweater. Like just mattress stitch up that and just like suck in like one stitch on either side of that weird gutter it's created and just seam it up. Which also I'm not mad about the idea of these sleeves coming in a little bit because they are quite big right now. Like not big in a way that's a problem, but like there's definitely extra fabric that they can afford to lose and it will not at all remotely risk making these sleeves too small. So I think that's what I'm gonna do. I just have to do it. Do I love the idea of mattress stitching all the way up here? No, nor do I love the idea of doing it twice, because I feel like if I'm doing it on this one, I should really do it on the other one for both just consistency and like sleeve size, but also it's not like this sleeve is great either. Like it doesn't have as dramatic of laddering issues, but it definitely does have its share of like funky things where the color change was, where I like managed to fill in holes by weaving in ends, but like it's just a little funky under there. So just tucking a couple stitches away, I don't think will be the worst thing. I do wonder, is that gonna be a little bit tricky because of the sleeve decreases? Depending on, I don't remember how like close the sleeve decreases are to that center line. Like, are they right on it or are they a couple stitches out? I don't remember. Also, like, I don't know who I am pretending that I like am not attached to perfect sleeve symmetry, because in knitting these at one point, I was like counting my stitches to be like, wait, how many decreases do I still need to do again? And I counted one sleeve and I counted the other sleeve and they were like 3 decreases apart from each other. There was like a 6 stitch difference or something. And I was like, okay. So this did mean that I had to do some slightly more rapid decreasing on one sleeve than the other to get them to land at the same stitch count. Can I tell which is which? I would guess it's probably this one because it has kind of a, you can like see a decrease happening in a way that I don't think is as obvious on this one. I don't really know, whatever. This is what I'm saying. Like why do I think I need to mattress stitch them both when they're already different? But I do think that I will, just to care about consistency this time. I don't know. So I do have at the end of my sleeve, because like I said, I did some decreasing going into the ribbing. I do have like a little bit of like a bubble sleeve effect happening. There's a little bit of sort of like rippling or ruffling happening at the cuff, which we'll see also in blocking how that shakes out. Like the ribbing probably will loosen up a little. So maybe that will be different, maybe it will not be, but I'm kind of open to either way that goes. I do think that it's cute, so whatever. Oh, this is really going now. Good for me. You see that? You see these fire skills? Good for me. So yeah, I kind of had my like myriad issues while I was dealing with the microstriping, where I, yes, should have just been doing helical knitting, note to self, but it was very smooth sailing once I got to my solid high tower. So it's been nice and simple since then. No laddering, magic loop not a problem when I'm only doing one color. And this whole debacle with helical knitting has sort of given me like a slight, I was gonna say an epiphany, but you know what? Like it's too soon to know that, because in knitting, I have found there are a lot of things that seem to me like a good idea, but the reality is that I just don't do them. And like, while they seem like things that would save me a lot of like time or hassle, all of these like hacks or shortcuts are like only as good as how often you actually use them. So like sometimes, even if something is gonna save me half an hour later, if it's like 2 minutes of inconvenience now and I don't wanna do it now, I just don't do it. So TBD if I actually do this, but here's what I'm thinking, because I find that trying to get myself to stop and watch a tutorial while I'm knitting It's very hard to do. Like I have to like actually not know how to do the thing, or I will just like power through and be like, I know enough. I know a way to do it, even if it's not the best way, whatever. I just don't like stopping what I'm doing to watch it. But what I've realized is that because there are so many things in knitting that I like learned how to do one time, but because it's not super frequently, like I forget how to do it and I need a refresher to do it again. Case in point, helical knitting. I'd already watched a tutorial. At one time, I in theory knew how to do it. Now couldn't remember. The only thing worse than watching a tutorial for something you don't know how to do is watching a tutorial for something you already should know how to do and that you've already watched before. In watching this video, I was like, oh my God, yeah, like really, I didn't even need to rewatch this whole thing. All I needed was like this like one bullet point note of just like, just slip your last 3 stitches before a color change. That's all. That's all I needed to know, which like if you haven't fully learned about helical knitting, if someone hasn't actually explained to you the whole thing, probably isn't gonna help you. Like that's probably just gonna be confusing and you're not gonna know what to do with that. But if you have before, if you understand the concept of helical knitting, that's probably enough information for you. And so what I've realized is that when I watch tutorials, I really just need to make notes for myself of like, what was the takeaway? Because now that I, in theory, understand the concept, but I just can't remember the details, all I need is the details. I don't need to watch James from Brooklyn Tweed demonstrate the whole thing to me in 12 minutes while diagramming to me how it's working. That was wonderful and so useful when I didn't understand helical knitting at all and didn't know what it was. But right now, all I need to know is to just slip the last 3 stitches so your color change is always moving. That's all. That's all I needed to know. And if I had just written that down the first time, maybe I would have like looked at that note, because that would take me 10 seconds instead of, oh, I have to stop and watch this whole YouTube video. So that's the theory I'm now operating on. I'm testing this theory by, I wrote down that note. I've started a note in my phone that's like knitting techniques. And so it's just like helical knitting, slip the last 3 stitches of the color so that your color change is always moving. And I'm planning to add to this other things that I'm similarly always having to look up. Things like mattress stitch, right? Where it's just like, I remember the concept, I just don't remember when you're going like horizontally versus vertically, which part of the stitch you're picking up in each case, because sometimes it's like the horizontal bar and sometimes it's like the V, just depending on direction. So I just need to note that down so I don't have to like watch the whole tutorial every time. So that's a theory I'm testing. It's a potential epiphany, and I'm hoping that it will mean that I refer to instructions and guidance more than I currently do, and as a result, get better results. So that's my theory. That's what I'm hoping. I will continue to report back on this as I add things to that list and do or don't refer to it. This is the thing. I will either continue to add to this all the time and it's gonna be great and I'm gonna get so much use out of it, or like 12 months from now, I'm gonna be going through notes on my phone, deleting extraneous things and be like, oh yeah, there's that note I haven't edited in 11 and a half months because I forgot it existed and never looked at it. So TBD, which one of those things it will end up being, but hopefully, it's an epiphany. So I'm really curious to see Lauren's Fade update.
Editing Allie here, hi. So actually not gonna get a Lauren update this episode. She's been really busy with work and just hasn't had enough time to work on it to have made any progress to really have much to say about it. But we'll check back in with Lauren when she has an update to give us.
Last time in our updates, we were at kind of very different points in our projects because she had to rip back a bunch of hers because she wanted to alter the rate of her fade, which was funny to see because in the first episode, I had only barely started the neckband and she had like most, if not all, I think even all of her raglan shaping done. I think she had split for underarms before deciding she needed to rip back. So she was so far ahead of me. And then because she had to rip back, and then also because we're knitting different sizes, like mine has just outpaced hers so rapidly, even despite the fact that I'm working at a fingering weight and she's working from a different pattern, she's working a DK weight. So even though mine is more stitches per inch, just because of the size discrepancies we're knitting, she's still knitting more stitches than I am. I actually asked her out of curiosity, I was like, hey, how many stitches are in the body of your sweater? Because mine is 220 and hers is 270, right? So despite the fact that she's working at a bigger gauge, she still is working more stitches than I am in a given round. So it's gonna take her a lot more work to knit the same thing that I am. And of course it's not like a one-to-one comparison because people knit at different rates. So like, I don't know, it's possible that I knit around in the same amount of time that she knits around because she just knits faster. It's also possible that it's the opposite. It's also possible I knit faster. So yeah, it's just been interesting to be able to like compare these things with her directly and just see like how different it is of an experience for both of us. Because if we are just like two people knitting at the same rate, like the same number of stitches and working away, I'm just gonna get to knit more things for myself in a given period of time than she's going to, which means that for all of the sort of, not pressure, but I guess just like significance that I feel of picking what I want to knit, right? Like I only have so much time. I can only knit so many things. I really feel like I want to pick things to knit that I'm really going to love and that I'm going to get wear out of. And there's so many beautiful patterns in the world and I don't have time to do them all. For as much as I feel that, that's even more so the case for Lauren. Like depending on the size that you're knitting, it has such an impact on like how much of an investment that it is for you to knit. And I feel like while that's a thing that had occurred to me in theory, it's so much more apparent in watching the different rates that our projects have progressed at. So I'm very grateful for Lauren being part of this little saga on the channel because I feel like it is kind of enlightening to get to see how very similar projects like shake out differently for different people depending on their different circumstances. And Lauren doesn't have her own podcast currently, but you can go follow her at HailSealSir on Instagram. So go do that if you want to see more of her knit stuff and be in the know if she ever does decide to start a podcast. But like also if she does, I will obviously also be here telling you. Another funny thing to me in looking at these is I was watching her update last time and I was like, wait, you're using 4mm needles? Because again, Lauren's working with a DK weight yarn. I'm working with fingering weight. So like in theory, DK is double fingering weight, right? And we're knitting on the same size needles, which I'm like, if that is not damning as far as like how tight I knit, that I am over here working a fingering weight fabric on 4mm needles and she's working a DK weight fabric with the same, and it's not like she's producing like a super duper dense fabric. Like she's knitting a t-shirt. It's not like she's trying to make this like thick. She just has like respectable tension, I guess. So that's just a really funny comparison to me in these projects, that we're knitting these very different fabrics on the exact same needles and we just knit differently enough that that works apparently. So I am so close to being done this. All that I need to do is finish the ribbing on these sleeves, do my tubular bind off, and wait, is there anything else? I already wove in the rest of my ends because I had a ton of those. Even though I had paused, like before I added in Hightower, I had paused and woven in all of my ends, but so many more ends just still appeared. Like the split hem obviously added some, and just so many ends. So very glad to have those dealt with, gone, woven in. So I just need to, finish the cuff. Oh, and like I said, do the mattress stitch up the underside of the arm to hide that little scraggliness. And then we will have a finished fade, and I will show you presumably next time this on as a finished object. So yeah, that is my update for now on the Tucker fade. Okay, now in a slightly uncharacteristic event for me, I have another whip to show you, sort of. Because last weekend I was going to visit at my sister's, and in the week leading up to that, I was working on my Tucker and I was feeling like it's kind of possible that if I keep working on this and then take it to my sister's this weekend, that I'm gonna run out of knitting to do like halfway through the weekend, and I don't want to bring a brand new project there because it's gonna require too much like focus in the setup of it to be able to just like knit casually while I'm hanging out with everybody. So I actually put the Tucker on ice for a few days during the week and started working on the swatch for my next thing, just to keep me occupied for a couple days and buy me more time on the Tucker that would be sort of mindless that I could just do while hanging out last weekend. So this means that I have swatched for my Serendipity sweater, which is finally gonna actually happen. Can you? I'm so far away from the camera. But I feel like you actually can see that quite well, which makes me feel optimistic about this sweater. You can see, obviously, I gave up on swatching after a couple inches. I even gave up in the middle of a row because you can see these bottom little flecks of white only exist on one side. I was swatching this in the round, so I think I just wasn't paying attention to like, am I done the side of the magic loop that is the end of the row or that is only halfway through the row when I decided to switch to just swatching my main color. So it's sort of paused to the middle of the row there, but let's talk through this project. The Serendipity sweater by Knitting for Breakfast. This has been in my plans for so long. Was this in my fall knitting plans? It was definitely in my winter knitting plans. It's now in my spring knitting plans. It's been making its way. So this started with me picking up this yarn when I was in Vancouver in the fall. So this is from Shelterwood Fiber Co. This is 100% Romney wool in a natural dark gray brown color that is just so pretty. I love how like rustic and woolly it feels. I love that it's from a fiber mill in BC, so it felt like a very appropriate Vancouver yarn shop souvenir. And I was thinking I would really love to use this as the main color in a colourwork sweater. So that was how this project originated. Thank you to Bad Anna's in Vancouver for being where I found this. So this pattern accommodates up to between a 62 to a 66 inch bust, and I still need to figure out exactly which size I'm knitting. I need to go back and look at their size chart again. But this pattern costs 550 euros or 850 Canadian. And then as far as yarn, like I said, we have the Shelterwood Fiber Co. in their DK weight Romney wool. I got 4 skeins of this from Bad Anna's. And then for the contrast colors, I have more yarn from La Bien-Aimée. There's a real theme here happening recently. So this is the Merino DK base, which is a 100% superwash merino from La Bien-Aimée. This is in their Inco colorway from the Anime collection. And then I also have the colorway Winter as my like white, neutral, basic contrast color. So 4 skeins of this, 1 of each of these 2. Adding all of that up, that puts us at a total project yarn cost of $227 Canadian, or about 157 US. And like I think most colorwork designs, this is a top-down circular yoke construction, which I've done before, but not in a really long time. So that'll be interesting to work on. So as much as I only have this tiny swatch, this was like 2 days, I think, of knitting, because there was just a lot for me to figure out with this project, because I've never done stranded color work before. So there was just a lot of little things I had to A, decide, and then B, figure out. So I had asked in a previous video for tips on like just beginner stranded colorwork tips for people who are tight knitters, because I have kind of been warned about me probably having issues with tension in colorwork because of being a tight knitter, and the importance of making sure that your floats don't end up puckering. So that's something I was very cognizant of, and I was asking for tips about that. And one tip that came up over and over again that like, thank you for telling me, because I think this really did save me a lot of frustration, and I do feel very good with how this swatch turned out. Like I do not have puckering going on in my floats. I feel like that looks pretty good for a first shot at stranded colorwork. The tip was just every time you're changing colors, just make sure you spread out the stitches on your right needle, just so that as that float is traveling behind, make sure it's traveling behind like the actual width those stitches will be when they are released from your needles, and not the width that they get scrunched down to sometimes on your needles. So just making sure to spread those out before doing the float. That was all I needed to know. Super helpful, definitely saved me a big headache. The thing I really had to decide in starting stranded colorwork was, how do I want to be holding my yarns? Because I have definitely heard of a lot of people doing, like, if you're working with 2 colors, you're holding one in your right hand and one in your left hand, and the right hand you're knitting English style or throwing, and the left hand you're knitting continental or picking. And as much as that makes sense to me, I think that's the most like efficient way to do it, I don't know how to knit continental. And so I was like, okay, I have to decide here. Am I going to make learning to knit continental a hurdle that I have to surmount in order to knit stranded colorwork? And I have sort of briefly tried continental before. I've like watched a tutorial, kind of tried just trying to get the tension and like wrapping it around my fingers a certain way and trying to, it just really, really did not come naturally to me. It felt very awkward in a way that knitting English style never did, even at the very, very beginning. So I just kind of made the decision that like, I didn't want to make my first stranded colorwork harder than it had to be by making myself learn how to knit all over again. It felt like a recipe for making me hate colorwork, which like, I suspect that colorwork is something I'm really gonna like, as long as I don't make it harder than it needs to be. And like, I see that doing it that way would be in the interest of efficiency, but also like, is it more efficient if I just hate it and so I just don't do it? I don't think so. So I decided to not worry about that. I also have seen people knitting colorwork where they hold both colors in their right hand, like they're throwing both of them, but just holding them with like different fingers so you can, and to be honest with you, that also seemed confusing and terrible to me. And I could see a world where I end up learning that, like I do more colorwork, I get very comfortable with colorwork itself, and then that's a skill that I teach myself later. Or maybe I do learn continental and learn to do both hands, but again, later. I just don't want to do that right now. So I decided that what I'm going to do for now is just do it the slow way. Like just knit it the way I knit anything now. Just holding my yarn as usual. And then when it's time to change colors, I will put down that strand and I will pick up the other strand. And yes, that will take me longer than if I were proficient at either of these other 2 methods, but I'm not. And I just don't want to make that a prerequisite for starting colorwork. I just want to start colorwork, and it'll take me as long as it takes me. And If I decide that I like color work enough that I want to learn a better way to do it, I will. But for now, we're just gonna do this. So that's what I did in working on the swatch. And in swatching, I realized that swatching for stranded color work is just really complicated in kind of myriad little ways. So initially, my thinking was, okay, I'm gonna do my swatch, but this is gonna be knit in the round, and you know, we know that your tension can change in the round versus knitting flat because you're not doing purls, it's all knits, which tend to be tighter. And particularly because it's stranded color work, I can also anticipate that that might change my gauge a little. So I should really be swatching this in the round to make sure that I truly have an accurate sense of my gauge, both in color work and regular. So I was planning to do what I normally do, right? Where you knit your flat swatch, but then you just like slide it to the other end of the needles and like float your color around so you have like the big ladders at the back. So I started trying to do that, but I didn't get very far because I realized that those giant ladders that are like not secured on either end. Hi, Buggy. Hi. I'm gonna look out the window. It was really wreaking havoc on the color work at the edges of my swatch because like the tension is always really wonky at the edges of a swatch that you've knit like faux in the round in that way. But with color work, it's just like tenfold because every single color where it starts in the row has this wonkiness to the first few stitches of it. I was just working on it going, this is garbage. This is not telling me anything. Like, this is just a disaster. So I was like, okay, well, what do I do now? So I started Googling, like, how do you swatch for stranded color work? And I started seeing like, yeah, like you will have these issues trying to swatch flat. You probably want to swatch actually in the round. And like for a minute, my brain was not working. And I was like, what do you mean swatching in the round? Like I thought that's what I was doing by like sliding it to the other end and then like having this big yarn flow in the back. I thought that was how you swatch in the round. And then I realized that what they were actually telling me to do was basically just knit a sock tube. Like just actually knit it in the round. It's just gonna be a weird little tube. And then when you're done, you can cut it and that's how you'll get your like flat gauge, right? So like, okay, cast on to do that, we'll start that. And it starts simple enough. I was just using the one color to get me a little like border to get me started. But I kind of quickly found as soon as I started the color work that it's also kind of imperfect trying to swatch this way because similar to the issue that I was having with my tucker where the color was switching kind of around the magic loop break, I found it basically impossible to keep the color work working around the magic loop breaks because just the distance gets like messed up by like one stitch being at the front needle and one being at the back. And you know, maybe it's gonna float like 3 stitches that extends across this, but it's actually just jumping across the gap instead of traveling the whole way like around the two. And so it was doing weird things definitely at the magic loop split, so I can kind of see like the middle of my swatch, which was one of those magic loop breaks. It kind of has a bit of funkiness to it that the rest of it doesn't, but it actually doesn't look that bad post blocking. But I mean, this is not an issue because I will not actually be doing any small circumference color work on the sweater, I don't think. I think that it's all above the underarm split, so it's just gonna be a big circle, so non-issue. And then I was chatting with Lauren about this and she was like, oh yeah, I think that if you actually are doing color work on magic loop, you need to like catch your float at the magic loop break basically to make sure that it doesn't kind of skip over to the next row without traveling the whole circumference. And then when I was working on this swatch, I, again, just choosing to kind of simplify this so I didn't have to learn 1 million things before I could do anything. When I was working on the swatch, I was not worrying about color dominance. That was not a thing that I had looked into yet. I had definitely seen talk about this. I think I had watched like a YouTube video about it a long time ago, just in sort of a like, what is this, like passive curiosity kind of way, but I wasn't applying it to any actual project. But I was like, okay, now this is relevant to me. So I knit this without factoring in color dominance at all. And once I had this done, felt pretty good about my floats, was like, okay, I feel like I have the information I need to start on this sweater. I feel like I would like to look into this one thing now. I would like to understand color dominance now that it's time to start this sweater. And so I was chatting with Lauren about this, and I'm so glad that I did because she's like, here's the exact one perfect tutorial that you want to go watch. And again, shout out James from Brooklyn Tweed because he just explains things so perfectly. And I'm so glad that Lauren pointed me to this tutorial. He answered every question that I had, and I could see a million different ways that someone could make a tutorial about this and just not explain certain parts of it in ways where if you were doing this in some ways, like if you were knitting one hand English and one hand continental, wouldn't matter, but that because I'm planning to do it both out of one hand, I actually need to understand these things to understand how they apply in that way. Because the way that the two strands of yarn will interact with each other. It's not going to be automatically handled for me by keeping one over here in this hand and one over here in this hand. Because they're both going to be over here, I really need to understand what their relationship needs to be to each other in order to have control over the color dominance. And James explains this perfectly. He demonstrates it the way that he knits colourwork, which is 2 colors in his one hand throwing. He also demonstrates it using one hand for each, and also in the way that he talks about it for the version where he's doing both in one hand. He explains it in a way where I fully understand how that translates into like, if instead of holding both, I'm just picking up and putting down. And when I was looking at the comments on this video, I saw a lot of people who were basically parallel universe me, where like if Lauren hadn't pointed me to this one perfect video, what happened to them is exactly what would have happened to me, which is like, I have watched 17 videos about color dominance, and this is the first one that has actually like made it make sense to me and told me everything I need to know and whatever. So it is like, you can quote me, it is the perfect color dominance tutorial. I highly recommend it. I feel very equipped now to incorporate this into my knitting. And this is another area where I am testing this theory that I mentioned of like, just taking a couple of very basic notes after I watch a tutorial so that I can refer back to it. Because this is like I don't know, it's like a 15-minute video where he's like covering everything you need to know. I don't want to have to watch that like next week when I go to cast this on and just remind myself, okay, which was which again? Like what do I do with which string? Like now that I understand the theory, all I need to know is what I wrote down for myself. Like it's just about whether or not you're crossing your strands when you're switching colors. Like is one clamping down over the other, or are they not interacting and you're just switching from one to the other without any kind of crossover? All I need to know is that the float of my background color does lock down on the contrast color yarn, but a float in the contrast color does not interact with the main color float, which makes sure that the background color float is the one that is like the most on the outside of the back. Like when looking at the back of the swatch, you will see more of the background color because it is less prominent on the front, more prominent on the back. And the contrast color is the opposite. It is the most prominent on the front, so it's less prominent on the back because it's kind of being hidden by the background color that's like covering it up. Does that make sense? But you know, it doesn't matter if it makes sense because all I need to know is that the background color float does interact with the contrast color working yarn, but contrast color floats do not interact with the background working yarn. That's all I need to know. I think. I haven't actually implemented this yet. So we'll see how that goes. But that's the theory that I'm testing, is that I watched the video and now all I need is my notes. So yeah, that's where we're currently at with my Serendipity. So basically as soon as I finish the last details on my tucker, I get to cast this one on. And you know, what great timing that I will have this ready probably for July. But you know, I don't want to put this project off any further because it has just kept being in my plans and I have just kept not finishing the thing in the queue in front of it in time to get to it in a given season. And I just don't want to keep putting this off until it feels like the appropriate time to knit it. Cause like also, will I want to knit it in August so it's ready for October? Like I probably won't feel like that's seasonally appropriate either. So we're gonna knit it when we're gonna knit it and it's gonna be beautiful. And I am really excited about how that Inco contrast color is showing up. I wasn't quite sure how it was gonna look as a contrast color and I still won't entirely know until it's part of a bigger sample, but I'm feeling like this is really promising. So I'm excited to see how this one knits up. All right, that's all my knitting updates for today. So let's get into some off the needles, which also feels extra appropriate since we're in sort of a like fun setting. So like I said, I'm in this cute cabin for the weekend, intending for it to be sort of a writing retreat, which I kind of feel like I should probably be writing right now and not filming, but I needed, scheduling wise, I also needed to fit one of these in this weekend. I managed to get 500 words written this morning before sitting down to film. Hoping I can get another 1,000 written after I finish filming before Mom gets home from her workshop. Wish me luck. But before we get into much of like a writing or reading update and stuff, I want to do my small business shout out. So today I want to shout out Mucky Mutts on Etsy. This is a Canadian Etsy shop where I a few years ago bought a long line for copper, so like a leash, just like a really long one. It's like 30 feet long. And this is just top of mind for me this weekend because I brought it with us. I knew we were going sort of like out into the country and I thought that there might be spots where when we're on a walk, it might be nice to be able to give him a little bit more freedom in places where dogs aren't allowed to be off leash. And I'm really happy I brought it. It turns out that a 10-minute walk down the road from us, there's a trailhead. So we were able to wander this forest trail. And this is one where dogs are supposed to be on leash, right? They don't want wildlife disturbed and all that. And so it was really nice to be able to give him like, you know, a little bit more than 6 feet of freedom that he can go like hop up on that log, he can go sniff that thing over there, but he's still very much on leash. He can't go chase wildlife or anything like that. And I love this leash because I'd previously had a long line that was just made of like a woven fabric, like a traditional dog leash, but just long. And it just got so nasty. Like in this way where it's like, it's nasty all the way down. Like it's not even just nasty on the outside. It's like the nastiness has like gotten all the way inside to like the core of the fabric and it's just blech. And like because of a long line, like, you know, I kind of try to keep it like well handled while we're walking, and like as he gets closer to me, I'll like shorten it and then like reel it out again or shorten it. But it just inevitably ends up on the ground sometimes and is dragging through like God knows what. So like, it was nasty. So what I really like about Mucky Mutts is that they work with like a biothane material. So it's not permeable in the same way. So the dirt stays very much on the surface. It usually just like falls off, but also you can wipe it clean very easily. It's also nice and thick, so it's not like a thin plasticky thing that's gonna be like painful if it like catches against your leg. It's just a really good, strong, smart material for it to be made out of. They also let you pick your colors and you can combine different colors. So Copper's is this fun like turquoise and dark blue combo that I really like and matches his harness and whatever. It's just cute, I like it. And like I said, we've had this for years. I think they also have like regular leashes and collars and things like that. So if you have a dog and you think this is a thing that would be useful for you, I highly recommend. And in addition to just places where dogs just aren't allowed to be off leash, it's a really useful tool if you're working on your dog's recall and you're in a place where like based on the state of their current recall, you can't safely let them be off leash because it's not enclosed. A long line can be a really useful intermediary step where you're giving them a lot more freedom than a regular leash. So you're working on recall at a further distance, like 30 feet is pretty far, but you still have this fail safe. So I found like when Copper was younger, it was a really useful training tool too. And it's just nice that it's from like a small little Canadian business. So shout out, we had a really nice hike thanks to Mucky Mutts. I do also have a reading update this week. So I need to know if you have read One of Our Kind by Nicola Yoon. And specifically, I need to know if you had first read her other books and then read this, because I know Nicola Yoon from adorable YA contemporaries. And like, I have been a fan of her work for a really long time. I met her years ago. She came to the Eaton Center Indigo for, I think, Everything Everything, which was like her first book. It might have actually been, I think it was after The Sun Is Also a Star had also come out, but she was touring because Everything Everything was being made into a movie. I think that's what happened, but that was like many years ago. And I love her writing. So that's kind of my relationship with Nicola Yoon. That's what she's been writing. Now she comes out, I think this was at the end of last year, she comes out with a book that is adult, not YA. And how would I describe this? It's sort of like thriller, sort of speculative, but also in this very like, it's very grounded in reality. Like in the way that there's like high fantasy and low fantasy, I would say this is like low speculative, or even thriller seems wrong. Like thrillers tend to be very set in reality, but also in a way that's much more like edge of your seat, like really high suspense, like really active, wild things happening. This is much more like, it's like everything is happening at this like low grade simmer that you can like see that bad things are happening, but you don't know quite what, and you don't know quite when it's gonna come to a head. Like there's not like dead bodies around that we're trying to figure out. Like it's much more restrained than that. But I hesitate to even say that it's less suspenseful than a traditional thriller, because I tore through this book. I have been kind of struggling to get my reading momentum back for months and months and months, and I've sort of, you know, had success with some books here and there that I would get through faster than others. But I mean, granted, this is not a long book. It's only like 250 pages, but I read this in like 2 days, which is way faster than I've read anything recently, because I just needed to know what's going on. And so I'm trying to think, how much should I actually tell you about this? What does the flap tell you? Okay, this is really funny because I was actually thinking about this comparison. So the flap says Get Out meets The Stepford Wives. I was gonna say it makes me think of Get Out meets Pleasantville. So sort of the starting premise of this book is that the main character, who is a Black woman in America, has been convinced by her husband they should move into this relatively new neighborhood that's sort of this like fancy bougie gated community, but where most neighborhoods in America that are like that would be predominantly white neighborhoods because history, generational wealth, etc. This one has actually specifically been designed to be a wealthy Black neighborhood. And he's like, this will be so nice for our son, where we know that he's not a minority, where we know he'll be safe. And they're sort of thinking, you know, this will be a really nice place to live where we won't have to feel like minorities all the time, like we're not being judged all the time. But when they move in, and as the main character Jasmine starts meeting people, it's just like feeling kind of weird. Like just no one really wants to engage with her at all in any sort of conversation about like the inequities of the world and like social justice and like all of the things that have brought us to a point where like an all Black utopian community is a thing that it feels like we need and where we wanted to come live. Everyone's just all sort of like blasé and like, oh, we're so fortunate, everything's great, what's wrong in the world? Nothing. And she's kind of like, what's going on here? So that's where we start, and the book is sort of this slow unraveling of like what is actually the deal with these people in this town. And like I said, I tore through this book. I loved this book. And the thing that I'm like, I need to know if you've read this and if you've also read her other work, like what I am so struck by is how much like I said, feel like she absolutely nails YA contemporary. She's so good. Love her writing. This is such a pivot, both age category, genre, even like the tone of her writing. It's so different, but it's equally phenomenal. So I'm like, the range on Nicola Yoon, I'm so impressed. And I'm just like, are we sure this is the same author? And like the only reason that I'm like, yeah, it's definitely the same author is because it's equally good. And when I saw she had this book coming out, I was like, that's a big departure. I doubt I'll like it as much, but I do really like her writing, so I will check it out. And to that I now say, bravo. Bravo Nicola Yoon, because this book was phenomenal and I highly recommend you check it out. Also, I think I was kind of destined to read this book no matter what. Like looking at the praise for this book, let's look at who these quotes are from. Jodi Picoult, who I've only read one of her books, but I did see her do a book talk in Toronto once and was really good. And she was so knowledgeable. She was talking about her book that she was putting out, which is the one that I've read, which is set in an abortion clinic, and just the breadth of knowledge and the like research into advocacy and stuff she was doing around reproductive justice, I was like so impressed by. So I, despite not having read a lot of her books, because I'm just not a big like tearjerker book reader, I have a lot of respect for her. So there's a blurb from her. There's a blurb from John Green, who all time, one of my favorite authors. Paper Towns, one of my absolute favorite books of all time. I've enjoyed all of his books, listened to his podcast, I've been watching his YouTube videos since I was like 16. Like me and John Green, we go way back, okay? And the other one is Ashley C. Ford, who I think I was introduced to through The Financial Diet, which is a YouTube channel and podcast series that I really love, and she's guested there several times. So she's a writer. I think she has mostly done like articles, like that kind of writing. She's written some really good pieces about things that I had read before. And then she recently put out a memoir called Somebody's Daughter that's about her life growing up as the daughter of a man who has been incarcerated for, I think, sexual assaults, like her entire life, and how that has sort of shaped her. And I also love her, like just from all of the different like interviews I've seen her do, reading her book, reading some of her articles, hearing her talk on different podcasts, following her on social media. I am really invested in her as a person. So I just feel like these blurbs were kind of put together for me. And here I am raving about this book. Go read it. All right, so that brings us to, I guess, the last remaining off the needles topic is the writing retreat of it all. So this cabin is super cute. I'll maybe pop up a couple more pictures. It's in this little town called Westport. It's not very big, but it's very cute. It's just the perfect little space for me to work during the day while Mom is at our workshop. And I'd mentioned in my last video that I was just having a really hard time figuring out how to like work writing into my routine in relation to knitting, because that didn't used to exist as part of my routine when I was last doing a lot of writing. And I've just been struggling to make a lot of progress. Like I've been making myself work on it kind of a little bit every day, but I just kind of always felt like I was like hitting my minimum and that's it, and just kind of like checking this box and not feeling like into it. And so I was thinking that it might be useful to kind of have a weekend where that's like my focus, where I'm coming to this place, like I'm putting myself in a different environment, I don't have my usual routine, and I can just focus on this and see if I can make more progress on it like that. And it's not like, you know, if I manage to write like a ton every day, Saturday and Sunday this weekend, it's not like I'm expecting that that's an amount that I'm now suddenly going to be in the habit of writing every single day. Like that's not the goal, and that's also not feasible because I've been spending hours a day working on it. But that if I can kind of get that head start done, that it might help me to get more into the story, more invested, and for it to feel more like something that I want to spend more time working on a daily basis, and that I am less eager to just check the box so I can move on, and instead want to kind of spend that time in that story, in that world, working on it. So that's my hope. Yesterday I got 1,500 words written, which is not like I think probably in my like dream world, I would have loved to get like 5,000 words written, because like when I was doing NaNoWriMo, I did NaNoWriMo for like 9 years, I think between like grade 8, like all through university. And when I was doing NaNoWriMo, like to hit 50,000 words in a month, you have to average, I think it's 1,667 words, I think is what that divides out to. And there are obviously some days where you're gonna fall short and then you have to make up for it. So I was consistently writing like at least that much almost every day. And then I would also have days where I was writing significantly more than that. And at least like once or twice a year doing NaNoWriMo, I would have a day where I wrote 5,000 or in a lot of cases even 10,000 words. Like I would just have a day where that was like balls to the wall, that's all I'm doing. So I think like a little part of my fantasy brain is like, yeah, I want like that kind of day. But like that's actually not really a realistic possibility whatsoever, because I was writing differently for NaNoWriMo. Like for me, NaNoWriMo was about creating that time to just do nothing but write, like just forcing that to be a big part of my life and my workload for this specific month every year. And the goal was never to create something that I was gonna ever polish into something. It was just like, I'm writing drafts. I'm not trying to publish a book. I'm 17. I'm just pounding out a draft, and it's just fun and it's silly and it's a way that I can like prioritize writing in my life, and it's not that serious. And in the time since then, I've definitely become more serious about it, right? I'm like, okay, you're like a whole adult now. So I'm now just approaching writing just more seriously. I've learned more about the craft and how to write better, but that often requires more thought. Like I just put together sentences a little more slowly, and I could pound words out at the speed of NaNoWriMo, but then I would also just spend so much more time editing away the 50% of it that's just hot garbage that was just filler because I was trying to hit a word count that day. So it's not the same. It's not really a fair comparison to be like, well, you didn't write 10,000 words yesterday, so you didn't do very well. So I spent many hours working on it, and those many hours produced 1,500 words. So that's not too bad. I'm hoping I will be able to match that again today. Like I said, I wrote 500 before I sat down to film this, so hopefully I can get another 1,000 at least done before Mom gets home from her workshop this afternoon. And yeah, I definitely, like I haven't written close to that many words in one day since I started working on this. I think when I started this weekend, I only had like 2,800 words of this draft done. Like it's been very like little tiny bits adding up so far. It's not been anything substantial. So if I could do another 1,500 words today, that will mean that I will have like doubled my word count that I came into this weekend with. So that would be fun. Wish me luck. But mostly I just hope that regardless of what my word count is by the end of this, that I feel more confident in like this story actually going somewhere than I felt when I got here on Friday, because I've been feeling very like, if I'm not really in this yet, like, do I even want to write this story? But if I'm not writing this story, what am I writing? Because that's always the hardest part to me. And I spend a lot of time working on this story and trying to develop the story I want to write. So if now I don't want to write it, now what? So hopefully by the end of this, the conclusion is I do definitely want to write it. So wish me luck. All right, that's all I've got for you today. So thank you so much for coming to knit with me. If you'd like to be here next time, I hope you'll consider subscribing if you're not already. If you already are, though, you're my favorite. And I'll see you next time. Bye.